Good day. My name's AJ Goldsby. I'm a life master from Pensacola, Florida, and I'm coming today to bring you another in my series of chess videos. This is a game that was the problem of the day for Tuesday, November 20th on the Chess Games website. That's www.chessgames.com. And I really enjoyed this problem. In fact, I enjoyed it so much. And several people wondered, one person sent me an email and said, basically, where did black go wrong? And I really did not know right off the top of my head. So my first thought was, what I really need to do is let's go ahead and annotate this game. And once I did that, I said, it turned out so well, and it was such an interesting game and such an interesting position. And it's really a study in chess tactics. I thought, why not go ahead and make a web page out of this and then do a chess video on it? So I said, what the heck, I would go ahead and do that. So without any further ado, we're going to take a look at this game. Again, this was the problem of the day for Tuesday, November 20th. And white is a guy named Fuderer, Andrea Fuderer, and black is Jan Donner. Donner is a very well-known chess player. Both players have passed on now. But this game was played in the Hoogoven's steel tournament in Beverwijk, that's in Holland or the Netherlands, in 1952. And Jan Donner is a very well-known chess master, very colorful player. He wrote some interesting books and did a lot of writing for newspapers. He used to write for a column for Chess Life. I used to read it many years ago when I was a youngster back in the 70s. And so anyway, without any further ado, we'll look at this chess game. Again, Fuderer is white and Jan Donner is black. Game starts off e4, c6, knight c3, d5, d4. And this transposes really just to the main line of the Caro-Kann defense. Okay, and if you don't want to play that, then the move knight f3, that leads to the two knights variation. All right, but anyway, going back to the actual game d4, we play d4, which is the main line. Now, if pawn takes pawn, if black plays d takes e4, then we get into the main line here. But black does something a little bit different. Well, first he plays d takes e4, and now bishop f5 is the main line, and knight d7 is what I would call the modern line. Basically, Karpov used to play that a lot back in, again, players my age, players that were, young and coming up back in the 70s, and who remember Karpov as being world champion and a very dominant player at that. Will remember him playing knight d7 consistently and winning a heck of a lot of really nice chess games with that line. But anyway, black does something a little bit different here. He plays knight f6, and this is a rather unconventional move. And basically white takes, okay? And now black has two ways of taking. He can take with his g-pawn here, or he can take with his e-pawn. Taking with the g-pawn, I believe, is the system or line known as the Bronstein-Larsen defense, or Bronstein-Larsen system. And taking with the e-pawn, I'm not really sure if it has a name. It was championed by Nimzovich. It was later played by players such as Salo Floor, who was probably one of the strongest players in the world at the turn of the 20th century. And also, it was also played a little bit by a former world champion, the late great Tigran Petrosian, the world champion from Armenia. The rule of thumb here is that you should always capture toward the center, but the problem with that line is that is a playable line. Again, that's the Bronstein-Larsen line, but by capturing toward the center, you get busted up pawn structure. You have an isolated h-pawn, you have a pawn island here, and you have a pawn island here. You have three pawn islands to white's two, so a lot of players don't like that line. In the actual game, he took with the e-pawn, and again, this was first played, I believe, by Nimzovich and later played by Floor and Petrosian. And again, the general rule of thumb is that you always capture toward the center. So you have to ask yourself, why did black not capture toward the center? In other words, why did he break this little rule of thumb? And I think the reason is there's several. Number one is that black gets a very solid position. A lot of times white sticks a knight on this e5 outpost. Well, obviously, as long as this f-pawn is sitting here on f6, there is no e5 outpost for white to stick a knight there. Well, if he can stick a knight there, you just take it. But anyway, so that's taken care of. Black has a quick and easy development. He plays moves like bishop d6, queen c7, and castles kingside. And also, too, this extra button, a lot of times, you can play moves like g6, and it can be very handy to have this extra pawn here near the king to kind of help black play defense. But anyway, that's the general reasoning for this line. Black's won a lot of fine games with this line, and when I post the webpage for this game, I will post a couple of links to some of the more interesting games, maybe on the Chess Games website with this game. There's several lines where black wins, and I'll have to post a link to at least a couple of those because there's some very interesting games. But anyway, in this actual game, black took with the e-pawn. And you know, it leads to very interesting play. Now, in my mind, the best line for white is probably the power book line, which would be c3, bishop d6, bishop d3, castles, queen c2, rook e8 check, knight e2, g6, h4. This is a main line which comes right out of MCO 15. White, the computers confirm that white's a little bit better here. He has a tremendous initiative and a good kingside attack. A really good game, if you want to study this, is a game between Kavalek and Anderson in their match game that was played in Washington, D.C. in 1978 there. White won a brilliant, very nice attacking game at just 31 total moves. That's a main line again, and that's out of MCO, and also that line is in the power book. That would probably be the main line. Going back here to our position here, at this point here, after black takes f6 on move 5, white does something a little bit different. He plays bishop c4. Obviously, you know, that's moves pointing at that f7 square here. We'll go ahead and highlight that real quick. Just to show you that's a very sensitive square, and that's the square that, of course, that white's looking at. He's looking at that square there. That's the key square. You know, that's the most sensitive square. F2 for white and F7 for black are the most sensitive squares in all the opening. You have to constantly be on guard for attacks to those kind of squares. There's many different openings where sometimes your opponent will simply gang up on those squares, and you know, your opponent will be unable to defend that. And you know, that's, you know, just a simple motif that happens in a lot of different openings. So white, by pointing his bishop against the white king there, in my book, signals very aggressive intentions. However, according to the power book and to the computer, c3 and knight e2 were, I mean, c3 and bishop d3 were, you know, probably c3 is the most sound move there, the line I just showed you. But anyway, white played something a little bit different. He went bishop c4 here, and black plays bishop d6, and now white, both sides just pretty much developed. Knight e2, castles, castles. In case you've never heard this before, there are basically just 4 principles, and 4 principles alone, that pertain to the opening in chess. It's number 1, if you can remember the little acronym that my friend John Percivalli came up with a few years back, chess develops powerful minds, which is an excellent way of remembering the 4 basic principles of the opening in chess. Controlling the center. C, you know, chess develops powerful minds. C is control the center. You've got to control the center. That is your number 1 job in the opening. Number 2 is develop your pieces. Think of the opening as a race to get your pieces off the back row as quickly as possible. Number 3 is protect the king and castle early. You always want to be thinking about protecting the king, especially in the opening phase. I mean, there's just too many lines where the king gets in trouble. King safety is a critical part, and getting castled is a critical part of every single opening. Sometimes you castle by hand. You don't always castle in an opening, but I mean, usually you always have to address the question of king safety at some point in 90 or 99% of openings that I've seen. So anyway, chess develops powerful minds. Control the center, develop your pieces quickly, protect the king and castle early. And the last one is that's not well understood, and I think even the Russians go awry here, is maintain a material balance unless you're playing a gambit, and with an eye towards square control. And I think that's where, you know, a lot of schools go completely wrong. They try to say pawn structure, king safety, this square control, you know, piece play, many different things are basic, you know, fundamental principles of the opening, and I think that's incorrect. I think that, you know, it's like math. The only way I know to really express it best is if you've studied a lot of math, you know what a primary set of numbers, and then you know what a subset of numbers are. And you can have many subsets of a primary set of numbers, but your primary 4 elements here are, you know, controlling the center, developing your pieces, protecting the king, and the maintain the material balance. Really the idea of square control, which was a concept really first clearly elaborated by Nimzovich. And, all the other ideas like piece play and pawn structure and those kinds of things are really subsets of the true four basic elements. So just try to remember, chess develops powerful minds. Do those four things in all of your openings, and eventually you're going to come out all right no matter what opening you play. But anyway, let's just do a little review here. White played bishop c4, 6 bishop d6, knight e2, black castles, white castles, queen c7. Notice that queen c7 there, got a little bit of a tactic there, hitting white's h2 square. That's looking at that square there. And so knight g3, that's a good move. It clears the queen. It clears, the rook file for the king's rook. In other words, the rook on f1 can come over to e1, shoot straight up to e file there. And black plays knight d7. Now both sides have, pretty much completed their development, or at least they've gotten their king castled. And a lot of textbooks on the middle game will tell you that the opening is over when both sides have castled. And I pretty much agree with that. That's really true, although you do have to keep at the back of your mind the idea very clearly that you have to get all of your pieces into play. Just tell you a little story really quickly. This might help a lot of players. I used to play this one guy over in Fort Walton Beach many years ago. They used to have 3 or 4 tournaments a year over there. They were run by Paul Kidder. But anyway, I was playing this one person over there, and I used to beat him all the time. And he said, AJ, you don't respect me as a player. And I said, how so? He said, well, every game you play me, and a lot of times you'll sacrifice pieces or even sacrifice your queen. And, he said, you always beat me spectacularly. And he said, basically, I want to know the secret. I said, I want to know what it is that you're doing that allows you to do this kind of thing. And I at first I didn't really have an answer for him. I mean, I really was kind of befuddled by his comment. But once I went back and studied the games, I noticed that he was a very aggressive player, but he consistently did the same things. In other words, he would develop 1 or 2 pieces. He never moved his queen's rook, or many times in all of our games, never moved his queen bishop. And then he would launch a full-scale attack on his opponent's king, and at least that was true in all of our games. And I went back and studied our last 5 or 10 tournament games because I had the score sheets of all the games, and I went back and looked at them. And then I came back later and told him, I said, look, I said, here's the problem. I said, basically, I said, I don't think you respect me as a player. I kind of turned the whole argument around, and he said, how so? And I said, well, here's the deal. I said, you're not using all of your pieces. And I said, this is what enables me to do these things like sacrifice my queen. I said, basically, you're hobbling yourself. You're handicapping yourself by playing and not ever developing your queen's rook and queen's bishop. I said, every single one of your games, have the same problem or deficiency in them. Well, that was really a good piece of advice. And I should have really never told this guy that, but because he turned around in his very next game, he developed all of his pieces. He played very energetically with all of his pieces, and he wound up drawing me. So he wasn't a bad player in our very next game. So, but anyway, that's just something to keep in mind there. That yes, the opening may be considered, the opening phase of the game may be considered to be more or less over after you've developed all of your pieces, but, and the caveat there being, but remember to just get all of your pieces out, excuse me, and get them to good squares and get them into active play. Obviously getting, you're trying to control as many lines, like my friend John Lanning, he likes to write little notes on index cards. He's one of my students here in Pensacola, Florida, and he writes a little note that I really, really like a lot, and he basically says you got to try to control as many lines or all of the lines as much as possible all the time. In other words, you're always fighting for all these different lines, and that sounds almost moribund or like a self-obvious statement. But then again, when you're playing chess, sometimes you tend to forget these things, and if you let your opponent dominate all of the open lines, then you're pretty much going to get in trouble. In fact, that's part of what happens, and the reason that I mentioned that's part of what happens in this game, is that Donner allows white to just dominate all the open lines and get all of his pieces to real effective squares. He doesn't find the best defense, and again, that was another challenge of this game, was to find the best defense for black, or did black just get blown away, or if he missed the defense, where was his saving move, those kind of things, and we'll look at that here in a minute. But anyway, both sides have developed all their pieces. White probably holds a small edge here. I like white. He has a little bit better control of the center. He's got a little bit more space. So, a few more open lines. So I really think that white's got to be a little bit better here. And anyway, so now I'll tell you what I would like to challenge you to do. as soon as I quit talking, I would like you to pause the video and see if you can guess what happens next or guess white's series of moves. Go ahead and pause the video now. Okay, if you did like I said and you paused the video right there and tried to guess white's move, you want to guess white's move. A lot of players here want to do simple developing moves like rook e1. I even had one student suggest knight f5, but that drops the h pawn to queen takes rook pawn check. White does a very good move. I think it's a very great attacking move. You could almost give that an exclam. Fritz prefers the very solid, just something like moving the rook over or whatever here, but or even c3, those kind of moves. But I like queen h5. White plays 10 queen h5, and that's a very aggressive attacking move. And one of the basic, again, now we're going to get in the middle game. One of the basic ideas or basic principles are attack the king. Tell you a story very briefly. I remember a game I saw with my own eyes that Grandmaster Lev Albert played over in New Orleans, and it was back when I was first formulating my basic principles of the opening, and he was playing black, and he was playing an expert, a fairly strong player, and he went right from the opening directly to attacking White's king, and he was black in this game, and I was really astounded by that. And I asked him, I said, how can you do that? How can you, how is that possible? How is that? And he explained to me, he said that is probably, the first prerequisite of an endgame. He said, study the games of not an endgame, of a middle game. He said, study the games of polymorphy. He said, if you're going to play chess, then one of the very first things you want to be thinking about, it's not necessarily something you do, but it's kind of like a checklist. The first thing you ask yourself is can I begin attacking the king? And very oftentimes when I play lower rated players, I finish my opening and their opening is rather inept, and usually there's a weakness there that I can exploit, and oftentimes I begin a successful attack on their king right out of the opening. And oftentimes it's because there's a deficiency in their play. In other words, they failed to control certain key squares. They failed to get a good development. They failed to combat, to fight for the open lines. They've done these kinds of things, and that's what makes these kind of things possible. But anyway, queen h5, that's a very good move for white. It's far from being just a winning move. The next move here, in fact, I'm just curious here for a second. Let me just back it up here, and I'm just gonna fire up Fritz here real quickly, and we're gonna see what Fritz says is the best move there for white. And I guess Fritz likes the move. That's really strange. Okay, rook e1. I guess, well, it's looking at a lot of different things there. But queen h5 actually is one of the better moves. It likes rook e1 and c3 and even bishop d3. But queen h5 in my book has got to be maybe the very best move for white. But anyway, queen h5. One of my other students, he was analyzing this game with Houdini, and he said, I guess Houdini didn't like queen h5. I forget what he said it would rather play instead. But queen h5 has got to be one of the very best moves. And again, it's made possible by the fact that there's no knight on f6. There's a pawn there instead, and white has all these open lines, open files, and open diagonals, and all this space in front of the black king, and that's something you should exploit. Anyway, black plays c5. Again, that's a correct move there. Black should fight for the center. There's no way black can let that go. Now white plays bishop to d3. Here Fritz very clearly, I did an overnight analysis, and it likes rook d1 here as the best move for white. And that's probably is the best move. But anyway, Fuderer plays a very good move. He plays bishop d3. Again, a very simple move, an attacking move on the king. And now black plays g6. Now, I read online, and also, too, I got some comments from students that, oh, g6 was the mistake. That was the bad move. This is what cost black the game. He weakened his king side, etc., etc., etc. And a couple of those same pundits said, oh, the correct move there was, instead of g6 here, is to play pawn to king rook 3 or h6. And that is completely wrong here. We're just going to quickly explore that. h6 is just a total loser. Now again, I'm going to stop talking for just a second here, and if you want to, you can pause the video and see if you can guess what the winning continuation from this position should be for white. Okay, well, if you did, like I said, you paused the video there, and if you really guessed, or you turned on an engine, or did some really good analysis, you probably guessed there correctly that bishop takes h6. Just ripping the white king up is the best move. Now the machine says black has to play a very horrible line. It has to play giveaway. D takes e, pawn takes, g6, E takes D6. And now, black can take white's queen on H5, but I take his queen on C7. And, white's up 2 pieces, 2 minor pieces. And that's just silly. I don't think anyone in a tournament game is a real, chess game between humans is going to play that out. They're going to resign. So, yeah, you could play giveaway, and maybe that is forced to stop the checkmate. But most players, I think most human players, would want to know what happens after pawn takes knight. Because, a lot of people want to think queen takes pawn, and then, but that might, if you give black 1 or 2 moves, maybe he defends. Well, the winning move there is not queen takes pawn. The winning move there for white is queen G4 check, exclam, and now king H8 and queen F5. And now white has just an unstoppable checkmate. You can see the H7 square there is just undefended, and black has no way of bringing a piece to that. He can slide his king over to G8, but queen H7 is still checkmate because the rook is blocking black's one lone flight square in that variation. But anyway, going back here, queen H5, C5, bishop D3, G6. Turns out that G6 was the correct move, and it wasn't the losing move at all. In fact, it was pretty much forced here for black. So now it's white's turn, and white plays queen H6. That's a natural attacking move. He's continuing his attack, trying to muscle in on the dark squares. Black plays rook E8. That's a good move for black. That gives his king an escape square. Maybe you should think now about playing bishop F8 on the very next move. And now white plays D takes C5. This is a nice little move here. Going back here, let me just scroll down here just a little bit. I think the computer-like moves like C3 and bishop to D2 here for white, either one of those moves might have been better than what was actually played in the game, but white played D takes C5 here. Now, this is the point where black, obviously, after C3, B6, black is completely fine. I mean, if white tries to, checkmate knight H5, black has just bishop F8. This square is defended by the knight on D7, and there's no checkmate here because of the bishop on F8, will guard the G7 square. So, that was and black has a very solid center. He can continue developing his pieces, bishop B7 or AD8, and I can't see black having a problem there. But anyway, in the actual game here, white did not play that C3 idea. That was one of the lines that one of the computer programs, I think it might have been Deep Shredder. I looked at this game with several different engines over the period of several different, many different days. But I looked at it with Fritz 13, Houdini, and Deep Shredder, and also a couple others too, Deep Junior, an older version of Deep Junior. I don't have the latest version. But I looked at it with several different engines because it's always fun to use a different engine and try to get maybe a different perspective, because a lot of times that's what's really interesting about the game of chess. In a game where there's a forced win, most computers will agree on what the winning line is for either side. But when you have a position that's not quite where it's to the forced win yet, or even it's unclear, then a lot of different programs are like different people. They're like different humans. One program like Hierarchs might be a positional program. Another program like Deep Junior might be a very aggressive attacking program that will also sacrifice material. So, if you really want to do a good job of analysis, you can't use just one engine, I don't think, and really get a good perspective on the game. You have to use a variety of different engines and can't figure out what the best move is. But anyway, white didn't play the C3 idea. Just going back here, after G6, queen H6, rook E8, white played D takes C5. Now, black has a very simple defense here. And there's a very simple rule of thumb that says when you're being attacked, you should exchange off pieces. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that one. I mean, that one's been around long before me. I was not the first one to ever elaborate that little simple rule of thumb. You can find that in just about any textbook on the middle game. But here black doesn't do that. He recaptures on C5, thinking he's going to maintain material, and that was the losing move. Okay, and we'll give that a question mark. The correct defense for black was just simply bishop takes G3, and that's best or 100% force. H takes, knight takes E5, bishop E3, knight takes D3, C takes D3, queen D6. And now, according to several engines, Houdini and especially Fritz 13, black might even be slightly better here. So that solves the question of where did black, was black's whole opening bad? No, it wasn't. His opening was fine. And I heard several incorrect theories put forth on the internet and on the Chess Games website, and a few of my students wrote me and made comments about this game. But you know, after D takes C5, again, the correct move there was bishop takes G3. Black plays knight takes C5, and that's, you know, hitting. It looks natural. It's a very normal looking move, and it looks even good for black. I mean, black's give him one or two moves, he's going to get all of his pieces, the great squares. But that's the problem, is in chess, you know, you can't give your opponent even one move. Right now it's white to move, and white basically strikes first. Now I'm going to stop talking here in just a second, and I'd like you again to play, you know, if you want to, pause the video and see if you can guess what the winning continuation is for white. Also, too, I wanted to comment that this was position with white to move on his 14th move. This was the position for the problem of the day whenever this you know, game was featured on the Chess Games website. I believe it was November 20th, Tuesday, November 20th. But anyway, we were right at the position for the POTD, the problem of the day, on the Chess Games website, and it's white, basically white to move and win. I'm going to stop talking now. I'd like you to, if you want to, you can pause the video and see if you can guess or analyze and find out what the correct continuation is for white. Okay, well, hopefully you had a good analysis session, and you were able to take a look at the game. And a lot of players, they want to do something slow, but something slow really doesn't work. Like h4, h5, like one student suggested, fails to just bishop takes g3, and not only is the attack stop, you know, black wins a pawn. Also, too, knight takes d3 might after h4, knight takes d3, and then bishop takes g3 would probably put a stop to any attacking notions here for white. Another student wanted to try to wiggle his bishop in. He wanted to play b3 and get his bishop on the long diagonal, and thought, oh, checkmate's going to happen on g7 because that's a weakened square. He had the right idea there, but he had the totally wrong application of the idea. The correct move for white is knight h5, and that's a real nice move. You can see that, you know, the knight hits f6, which is undefended currently. That was what was the main drawback of knight takes c5, by the way, is that it left this f6 square unguarded. And white threatens h7 here in a minute, especially if pawn takes knight. Then the bishop on d3 is free. You know, black can't stop and play knight takes bishop now because of queen g7 mate. So basically now black's got two ways to lose. Okay, he took here with g takes h5. The computer here wants to play take on h2 and then start playing giveaway. That's just silly. It doesn't amount to anything. You could take on h2 there. It's a pawn, but you got to know that at the end of this combination, that bishop's got to fall, and also the bishop could be trapped just by g3. Black has two ways to lose here. In the game, he played g takes h5 and lost one way. One of my students said, oh, well, black could have defended better with bishop f8, and that stops all the problems on because of this bishop. He said this bishop never gets in the game. Well, that's true, but he forgot something, and the thing he forgot was knight takes f6, king h8, queen takes h7 mate. By the way, this student was very young. I think he's only like 7 years old, and he lives down in South Florida, and he's just started playing chess. So before you're going to harshly criticize him, you got to realize he hasn't even learned how to use an engine yet, and he's also very, very young. So anyway, after knight h5, that's the cruncher there, and black plays g takes h5, and of course now the bishop on d3 is unleashed, and it comes into the game very strongly. Bishop takes pawn on h7 check. Now the rest of these moves are forced. King h8, bishop g6 check, king g8, queen h7 check. And here black resigns because it's a simple checkmate from here. I'll go ahead and just briefly, I'll show you the checkmate is after king f8, bishop h6 check. I believe he's got to play king e7. That's the only legal move. Queen takes f7 check. Now the king only has one flight square, and it's not hard. There's nothing he can stick in the way, and he can't take the queen. King d8, and now queen takes e8 as mate. And that pretty much concludes my analysis of this game. This was the game Fuderer versus Donner, and this was from Beverwijk, 1952, the Hoogoven Steel Tournament. It was played in Holland or the Netherlands, if you prefer. And it was the Chess Games problem of the day on, I believe it was Tuesday, February 20th, 2012. That completes my video and my analysis of this game. I hope you enjoyed my video. And I'll have a web page ready here when I post this. Before I even post this video, I'll go ahead and get the web page posted. And if you want to find the web page, all you have to do is click on the link right below the video where it says show more, and I'll give you the link there for the replay for my web page, the link for my web page, and also the link for the replay page for this game on chessgames.com. If you really enjoyed my video and would like to contribute to my web page building efforts and also my video making efforts, please go to www.paypal.com and use my email, which is lifemasteraj@yahoo.com. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you learned something today. Hope you enjoyed the analysis of this chess game, and have a great day.